Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Happy Saturday. A very special Saturday for the Seattle Seahawks, as it were, because they have something of a game tonight. It's not a game that will count in the standings. It's not a game that will be particularly well tracked. It's not a game that you can watch on TV. At least, I don't think you can. But it is a game that will be played, and it is a game that you can attend. So if it strikes your fancy to watch the Seattle Seahawks do their annual mock scrimmage game slash training camp practice, then you can certainly go do that. It is later tonight. I think actually by the time this video gets posted up, it'll be about an hour away from the festivities starting, but the game won't start until much later. So, we got to talk a little bit about this. We got to discuss some expectations, got to discuss some things to watch for, and try to understand what we're getting into here. So, the Seattle Seahawks are hosting what they call the Seahawks Football Fest. It's basically a training camp practice inside Lumen Field where fans can come watch. So, it starts, like I said, in about an hour. We got this article on Seahawks.com that discusses it in more detail, but the idea is that it starts to simulate a game experience for these players, because at training camp, you're not on a real football field, you're not in front of more than a few hundred fans, you're not in an actual stadium. So this is like the next step up, and then next week on Saturday, we have our first preseason game. So it's like you're taking steps up. You're at training camp, and then you're doing this football fest, then you're doing a preseason game, and then you're getting to a regular season game. So it's an important part of the process. I've discussed the mock scrimmage game extensively the last couple of years, and it's been something that people have been really interested in. It's something that people really want to try to wrap their head around, because we learn things. We learn important things from these mock games. So, with all that being said, establishing what this is and how it works, let's talk about what we should be looking for later today. Let's talk about expectations. Let's talk about the interesting things that we want to hear and maybe we don't want to hear. So, I'll be making some videos talking about it after. But before we get there, let's go over a few things. I think that in this game, the most interesting element of the Seattle Seahawks will be the interior offensive line, because we don't know what we really have there. We don't know if we have a massive hole at center. Maybe we have a massive hole at left guard. Maybe we don't, but we have a massive hole at right guard. Maybe we don't have the hole at center, but it's at like anything could happen there. I feel fine about right guard, but that's because right guard is a relatively low impact position. So to me, if you take care of the other two positions, right guard will just slide into place, regardless of who you put there almost. But you need to actually take care of those other two positions. And if push comes to shove and you just have to put Anthony Bradford out there at right guard, I think he'll be okay. So that, not so much. But what are we doing at left guard? Is it Tomlinson? Is it Haynes? Is it somebody else, a wild card? Center. What is Oluwatimi going to do? It hasn't been great coming out of camp. If he doesn't start to turn it around, that will up the anticipation and maybe even anxiety around bringing in Connor Williams. So I think that's probably the most important thing, especially because if those guys are going up against our defensive line, that's kind of one of the strengths of the team. Now, to my recollection, the starters are on one team and the backups are on another team. And understand that the starters pretty much always win. They pretty much always rule the roost because they're the starters and the backups are the backups. But even if it is the backup defensive line against the starting offensive line, there are some guys on this defensive line that we're pretty excited for, that should be able to pose a real challenge. We have three relatively legitimate nose tackles on this team if you count Cam Young. And I know Cam Young's a second-year player who didn't do that much as a rookie, but he's an NFL nose tackle. And then you've got Hankins and you've got Reed. So those guys will be challenged. So I'm really going to keep an eye on what those guys do in particular. And other than that, I would say the inside linebacker stuff with Baker and Dodson, maybe a little Tyrese Knight sprinkled in there as well. John Radigan, throw him in there. Want to see how those guys look too. I want to see whether or not the defensive line and linebacker groups are working well together. I think that that is probably an area that there's tremendous potential for the team to be good, but there's a very low floor there. There could be a, not just because of injury too, like there is a low floor at that position, and I want to kind of see that start to take shape. So those two things I want to hear about from this mock game. There's not going to be Geno Smith, I assume. It would be weird if he actually played in this game after missing 3 straight practices. So it's probably going to be Howell with the starters and PJ Walker with the backups, which that's going to make it a little bit tougher to evaluate receivers potentially because Howell has been inaccurate so far in camp. And I mean, PJ Walker may not have a spot on a 53-man roster this year. So he is what he is. So it's going to be a little bit harder to evaluate receivers. It might be a little bit harder to evaluate offensive line play because you don't have a quarterback that you can really count on to be in the right position and get the ball out of his hands on time. So that's not ideal. At the same time, I don't feel like Geno Smith specifically needs this. He's played in enough games in his career to know what it's like to play in an NFL game. One thing about the scrimmage game is that it's probably more meaningful for rookies and guys who haven't played in NFL games before because they're ramping up towards an actual NFL experience in front of a packed crowd, even at home. So not too worried about that element of it. Of course, it's going to be very interesting to see what the offense looks like in terms of tight end usage, in terms of how often we have 3 receivers on the field versus 2. Does anybody make a standout play to make the roster at the back end on receiver? Like, we know the top 4, but is Chenault going to do something? Is Eskridge going to do something? Is Derek Young going to do something? What about Hayden Hatton? These are the names that I think are going to be of the most interest when trying to figure out who's going to be the last 2 receivers on the team. So I think that runs it down fairly well. I'm also interested to see, I guess, how we cover the new kickoffs. But I think that's going to be a little bit of an odyssey for every team. So if we look not so good covering that new kickoff style, I wouldn't really worry about that because I think that's going to be an adventure for most teams. So those are the main things that I want to hear about from this mock game. And my plan is to make a video basically right after the mock game ends tonight. As soon as we basically have all the information we can, I'm going to make a short video tonight recapping the major stuff and just trying to talk about the game in general. And then tomorrow morning, I'm probably going to post a video that's much more detailed and maybe we're not going to go play by play, but we're going to dig into a lot of the nitty gritty of the game. So that's the plan for coverage. I think that's what I did last year. People seem to get something out of it. So that is the plan for later tonight. So keep an eye out for a video a little bit later than usual. Final thing I want to say in this video before we wrap up is we've got 3 preseason games coming up. We have 1 a week away, another 2 weeks away, another 3 weeks away. And I plan on live streaming a watch along of one of them. But I don't know which one yet. I don't have a super strong preference. I know one of them is on much earlier than the other 2, or maybe one's on much later than the other 2. I think like 2 of them start at 4 and one of them starts at 7. It might be the other way around. Either way, it doesn't really make that big a difference to me. But I need to pick one of the preseason games to do a watch along of. So what I'm gonna do is sometime in the next day or 2, I'm gonna post a poll on the community tab and ask people what they think I should do, and they're going to go ahead and answer that poll. I may end up removing one game from the pool. I may end up saying I don't want to do the first game because that's typically a game where not a lot happens, and I suspect the second game will win just by virtue of the fact that it's the second game, and that tends to be the game where more players play. But I'll go ahead and leave it up to the poll. So keep an eye out for that. Might post it later today. Might post it tomorrow. But yeah, got to make a decision there. So that's what's up. Let me know what you guys think. I'll see you guys later. Go Hawks. And mock scrimmage training camp practice tonight. Be there if you want to be. Let's see what happens. Go Hawks.